Investigating the ancient religious leaders and practices of Ireland is a fascinating, complex journey that demands evidence-based study from multiple sources. Through archaeological finds, astronomical alignments, ancient structures, and historical manuscripts, we piece together a picture of the spiritual beliefs that may have driven Ireland's earliest inhabitants. This exploration will begin with the Neolithic farmers who constructed the megalithic tombs, examine the structure of the Bronze and Iron Ages, and consider the insights provided by the caves of the Burren. We will also scrutinise how reliable sources such as classical accounts and later Irish manuscripts are for understanding these ancient religions. This video will then explore the Celtic revival and the rise of New Age movements attempting to reconstruct Ireland's old religious practices. Ultimately, we will assess whether enough evidence exists to understand and accurately recreate the ancient beliefs of Ireland.
For a moment, consider looking at these following sites: Order of Mystic Wolves, Seán Ó Tuama, Irish Heritage, History, Culture, Myths and Legends, and Pride of the Emerald Isle Route. Margaret. Also, if you enjoyed this video, if you could like, subscribe, share or comment. Also, if you wish to support the upkeep of the channel by donating to the above link or going to the About page and click on the Buy Me a Coffee link. All donations are greatly appreciated. Gurb Míle Maith.
The Neolithic period in Ireland, spanning from roughly 4000 BCE to 2500 BCE, marked a fundamental shift in the way people lived and interacted within their environment. These early agricultural communities were among the first to clear forests, cultivate land, and establish long-term settlements, often near rivers or other water sources. However, what truly distinguished the Neolithic people of Ireland is the legacy of monumental stone architecture they left behind. Their creations, vast tomb complexes, stone cairns, and ceremonial landscapes, are among the most remarkable megalithic structures in Europe, hinting at sophisticated social, religious, and cosmic awareness. While the primary purpose of many of these megalithic structures was burial, their scale, complexity, and symbolic placement reveal intentions beyond simple interment. The most famous of these sites include Carramore and Carrakeel in County Sligo, Lough Crew in County Meath, and the Newgrange Passage Tomb in the Boyne Valley, also in Meath. These monumental sites were placed where the living interacted with the dead, and they likely held deep religious and symbolic significance for the communities that built them. The use of elaborate stone carvings, as seen on decorated stones of Newgrange and Lough Crew, may suggest that these tombs served as more than mere burial places. Swirling spirals, concentric circles, and other geometric shapes carved into stones are often interpreted as representations of cosmic cycles or spiritual journeys. Furthermore, the labour and resources required to construct these tombs imply that they are integral to the society, serving as focal points for communal gatherings, rituals, and ceremonies that connected the living to the dead and to the cosmos. Excavations at these megalithic sites have yielded a range of artefacts, including pottery, beads, and tools, as well as human remains, often cremated. These objects, placed within tombs and cairns, suggest a belief in an afterlife where the dead retained a presence or influence. Grave goods such as pottery or personal items indicate that the Neolithic people may have envisioned a journey after death, for which the deceased would need sustenance or protection. In the case of Newgrange and similar sites, offerings of animal bones and food items point to ritual feasts or sacrifices held in honour of the dead or as a means of appealing to the deities or ancestral spirits. The discovery of cremated remains in many of these tombs, including Newgrange, suggests a distinct funerary practice. Cremation may be seen as an act of purification, transforming the body into ash before it entered the afterlife. Alternatively, it may have symbolized the release of the spirit, allowing to join the ancestors or the cosmos. The inclusion of multiple individuals in the same tomb hints at a communal approach to burial, possibly reflecting a society where ancestral veneration played a central role. One of the most striking features of Ireland's megalithic tombs is their alignment with celestial events, which suggests that Neolithic communities had a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and the cycles of nature. This awareness is best exemplified at Newgrange, where the tomb's passage and chamber align precisely with the winter solstice sunrise. Each year, around December 21st, sunlight enters the narrow passage and illuminates the inner chamber for a few moments. This alignment reflects a deep reverence for the solstice, a time of year when the days have begun to lengthen, symbolizing the return of light and life. This phenomena suggests that the tomb may have been part of a religious or ceremonial calendar. The winter solstice would have held a significant meaning at a turning point of the year, marking the transition from darkness into light. For a society so closely tied to the land and its cycles, this movement of cosmic renewal would have represented rebirth and the continuity of life. The illumination of the inner chamber, a space associated with the dead, symbolically links the return of light to the ancestors, possibly suggesting a belief in cyclical rebirth or resurrection. Newgrange is not the only site with astronomical alignments. The Loch Crew Cairns, another important Neolithic complex in County Meath, align with the equinox sunrise. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, sunlight enters the central cairn and illuminates specific carved stones, similar to Newgrange's winter solstice illumination. Such alignments imply that these tombs were part of a broader ritual landscape, when the movements of the sun and stars wove into the fabric of spiritual life. In County Sligo, Carramore and Carrowkeel are two other major Neolithic complexes that offer insight into the practices and beliefs of the more ancient communities. Carramore, one of the oldest megalithic sites in Ireland, consists of over 30 tombs arranged in a loose circular pattern, creating a ceremonial landscape that spans the Ballygawley Hills. Carrowkeel, with its cluster of cairns on a hilltop, provides a panoramic views of the surrounding landscape, symbolising connection between the tombs and the natural world. While these sites do not exhibit the precise solar alignments of Newgrange, their elevated locations and commanding views suggest that they were positioned deliberately to connect with the land and sky. Excavations at Carramore have revealed traces of rituals involving fire, food offerings, and the arrangement of stones, suggesting that these sites were places of ongoing ritual activity rather than static burial sites. Here, as in other Neolithic sites, the combination of burial, feasting, and astronomical alignment points to a belief system that integrated the physical and spiritual worlds, recognizing the cycles of nature and their impact on life and death. The choice of stone as the primary building material for these structures may also carry symbolic weight. Stone is enduring and immutable, qualities that made it ideal for constructing monuments meant to last across generations. By building with stone, Neolithic people creating a lasting testament to their ancestors and their beliefs, creating a bridge between the living and the dead, as well as between human and divine realms. The architecture of the tombs often creates a journey inward, from the open world of the living to the confined dark chambers of the dead. This passage from light into darkness, coupled with the cosmic alignment, invokes the journey of the soul from life to death and possibly to rebirth. The use of concentric designs at the carvings of Newgrange, which are thought to represent spirals or cycles, mirrors the symbolism of death and rebirth, suggesting cosmology, where the cycles of nature and the movement of the stars reflected the fate of the human soul. Building and maintaining these massive structures would have required communal effort, possibly involving large gatherings for construction, ceremony, and ritual observances. The labour involved in quarrying, transporting, and shaping stones suggests a highly organised society with leaders or religious figures capable of coordinating such projects. These sites are likely served as focal points for the community, where the people gather to honour ancestors, celebrate seasonal changes, and reaffirm social bonds. The construction of such monuments would have united individuals on a shared purpose, strengthening the community's identity and shared beliefs. The megalithic monuments of Ireland's Neolithic people are far more than relics of the ancient society. They are sacred landscapes that encode the beliefs, values, and cosmology of a people attuned to cycles of nature. Through the alignment of these sites with celestial events, the inclusion of ritual objects and grave goods, and the symbolic use of stone, we catch glimpses of a spiritual system that venerated ancestors, honoured cosmic forces, and celebrated the eternal rhythms of the earth. The Neolithic people of Ireland through their megalithic monuments, left behind not only places for the dead but sites that continue to inspire wonder, inviting us to imagine the beliefs and rituals that shaped Ireland's earliest spiritual traditions. The Bronze Age in Ireland, which began in 2500 BCE and extended into the early centuries of the first millennium BCE, brought significant changes to Irish society and its landscape. This era witnessed the introduction of metalworking, social stratification, and new forms of ritual expression, particularly in the form of stone circles, stone rows, and cooking pits known as the folktore. These developments reflect evolving beliefs, practices, and ways of interacting with the natural and spiritual world. Stone circles and rows suggest a continued, possibly heightened reverence for celestial cycles, while folktore reveal ritualized cooking and offerings that may have held religious or symbolic significance. Bronze Age stone circles are among the most enigmatic structures in Ireland's archaeological landscape, typically comprising large stones arranged in circular formations. These circles are found throughout Ireland, with some of the most prominent examples in Cork, Kerry, and Limerick. The construction of these circles would have required significant community effort, suggesting that they were highly valued within their societies. Stone circles are generally smaller than the Neolithic megalithic tombs, often composed of a dozen or so standing stones. While they do not usually serve as burial sites, some have been found to contain cremated remains, leading scholars to propose that they may have been places of ritual or ceremonial gatherings associated with death, ancestor worship, and perhaps even rites of passage. What truly stands out about many Bronze Age stone circles is their alignment with celestial bodies. Some circles, such as the Drumbeg stone circle in County Cork, are aligned to the setting sun at the winter solstice, much like the Neolithic Newgrange. This solar alignment suggests that the circle may have been used to mark seasonal changes, likely important for an agricultural society dependent on cycles of planting and harvest. Other cycles are aligned to lunar or stellar events, hinting at a complex understanding of astronomy that may have been used for calendrical or religious purposes. The orientation of stone circles to specific points on the horizon reveals an ongoing engagement with celestial phenomena and the changing seasons, which were likely seen as manifestations of the divine. Grange Stone Circle, located near Lough Gur in County Limerick, is the largest stone circle in Ireland, an extraordinary example of Bronze Age ceremonial architecture. Measuring nearly 50 metres in diameter, it consists of over 100 stones placed in a nearly perfect ring. The imposing size of carefully chosen stones, some reaching up to 2.8 metres in height, suggests that Grange was a significant centre for ritual gatherings and religious observances. Archaeological evidence from Grange Stone Circle points to repeated ritual activities. Excavations have uncovered pottery shards, stone tools, and charred animal bones, suggesting that feasting or offerings took place within the circle. The ritual feasts may have included sacrifices of livestock, which were then consumed as part of community gatherings. The orientation of Grange Stone Circle has been found to align with the rising sun on the summer solstice, indicating that it was likely to celebrate this important solar event. In this context, the summer solstice may have symbolised abundance and fertility, marking the height of the growing season and arrival of long, productive days. The sheer scale of Grange and its alignment to the summer solstice reveal that it was a place of social and spiritual importance. The large gatherings held there would have strengthened social bonds and reinforced a shared sense of community and cultural identity, grounded in a collective reverence for the cycles of the natural world. Another iconic site is Drumbeg Stone Circle in County Cork. Known for its alignment to the winter solstice, Drumbeg has become one of the best studied Bronze Age sites in Ireland. The circle is composed of 17 stones, with the tallest stones positioned to form a portal entrance and a recumbent stone opposite. The arrangement of these stones indicate careful planning, with the recumbent stone aligned with the setting sun during the winter solstice. Excavations at Drumbeg have uncovered a number of intriguing artefacts and features, including a nearby cooking pit or folktore. The pit contained traces of charred bones and food remains, leading archaeologists to speculate that Drumbeg may be a site for ritual feasting or sacrifice. The proximity of the folktore to the stone circle suggests a connection between cooking and ceremonial activities, with food possibly prepared and shared as part of religious observances. This cooking pit may have been used for more than just sustenance. It could have symbolised offerings to deities or ancestors, with food cooked and consumed as part of a sacred ritual. The presence of the Folleg Fia, along with the solar alignment, suggests that Drombeg was a multifunctional site where religious, social, and possibly political ceremonies took place. The winter solstice alignment in particular may have been a time of reflection and renewal, as the darkest day of the year marks the return of longer days and the promise of spring. In this sense, Drombeg reflects an ongoing tradition of marking the passage of time and the cyclical nature of existence. In addition to stone circles, the Bronze Age landscape in Ireland features numerous stone rows, linear arrangements of standing stones, often orientated in specific directions. These stone rows, while less visually striking than circles, are thought to have held significant ritual value. The orientation of many stone rows towards points in the horizon where the sun or moon rises or sets suggests that they served as markers for astronomical observances or pathways for ceremonial processions. In some cases, stone rows appear to direct attention towards specific features in the landscape, such as distant mountains, rivers, or other natural landmarks. This focus on the horizon and surrounding landscape highlights the Bronze Age people's integration of nature into their spiritual worldview. Stone rows may have served as paths or guides for ritual processions, connecting communities with both the land and the cosmos. This alignment with natural features may have held symbolic meaning, with the stones acting as markers for the pathways leading to sacred or spiritually significant locations. Folleg Fia, stone-lined pits used for boiling water, are amongst the most distinctive features of the Irish Bronze Age landscape. These pits were usually reconstructed by digging a shallow hole in the ground, lining with stones and filling it with water, which was heated by adding red-hot stones. Originally thought to be solely used for cooking, the frequency in which the Folleg Fia are found near stone circles and other ritual sites has led archaeologists to reconsider their role in Bronze Age society. The presence of animal remains within many Folleg Fia, especially near stone circles, hints at a possible ritual significance. The cooking of meat in these pits may have been a sacrificial act where offerings of animals, typically cattle or pigs, were dedicated to gods or ancestors. The communal feasting that followed could have reinforced social bonds and provided opportunities for the community to gather and celebrate important events such as solstices, equinoxes, or significant stages in the agricultural cycle. In some cases, Folleg Fia are found alongside ritual objects, suggesting that they were places of ceremonial importance. This connection between cooking and ritual implies that food preparation was seen as an act with spiritual significance. Offering food to deities or ancestors may have been the belief to sustain or appease these supernatural forces, ensuring protection and prosperity for the community. The Folleg Fia therefore functioned as more than simple cooking pits. They are places where the sacred and the mundane intersected, allowing the Bronze Age people to perform acts of devotion through communal feasting. The combination of stone circles, stone rows, and Folleg Fia reveal that the Bronze Age landscape was one of complex ritual significance. These sites reflect a culture deeply attuned to the cycles of nature, with a cosmology that likely saw humans, animals, and the cosmos as interconnected. Stone circles and rows reveal a careful consideration of celestial events, while Folleg Fia suggests ritual that involved cooking, feasting, and potential sacrificial offerings. Together, they paint a picture of a society where ritual and religion were not confined to temples or isolated from daily life, but were deeply integrated into the land and community. The existence of these sites in close proximity to each other suggests that the Bronze Age people saw the natural world as a living landscape, filled with spiritual meaning. Stone circles and rows aligned to the movements of the sun and moon, which would have allowed the community to observe and celebrate cosmic cycles, perhaps believing that these ceremonies helped to ensure harmony between the human world and the forces of nature. Folleg Fia, with their combination of food preparation and sacrificial offerings, would have added a layer of ritualized sustenance, linking the act of eating with divine observance. The stone circles, rows, and Folleg Fia of Bronze Age Ireland reveal a society where ritual practices were embedded in the landscape and in daily life. These sites were not only places of religious devotion, but also centres of social cohesion, where communities gathered to mark the passing seasons, to honour the divine and reinforce social bonds. Through their carefully constructed stone circles and rows aligned to the cosmos, and their Folleg Fia, which united cooking with ritual, the people of the Irish Bronze Age created a lasting testament to their beliefs and values. These sites stand as silent witness to a way of life that saw the land, the stars, and the community as interconnected aspects of a sacred whole. The Iron Age in Ireland, spanning from roughly 600 BCE to 400 CE, is often regarded as a time of significant transformation. Characterised by the introduction of iron metallurgy, shifting social structures, and increased interaction with other Celtic cultures across Europe, this period saw the development of unique religious practices deeply intertwined with the landscape and the sites of Ireland's ancient ancestors. During the Iron Age, Irish people not only engaged with their spiritual sites established by early Neolithic and Bronze Age communities, but also transformed and reused these sacred spaces, integrating ancestral monuments to their evolving religious practices. Although the scarcity of written records complicates our understanding of Iron Age religion, archaeology and classical sources provide valuable insights into spiritual life in this era. One of the most notable aspects of Iron Age religious practice in Ireland is the reuse of earlier sites such as Neolithic megalithic tombs, Bronze Age stone circles and other ancient monuments. These structures, long abandoned by the original builders, continue to hold cultural and spiritual significance for Iron Age communities. The practice of honouring and repurposing ancestral sites may have been driven by a belief that these places were still inhabited by the spirits of the ancestors who could influence the lives of the living. By re-engaging with these ancient spaces, Iron Age communities connected themselves with a lineage that stretched back into the distant past, grounding their beliefs in a sacred continuity. For instance, the Neolithic passage tomb of Newgrange in the Boyne Valley remained a significant site during the Iron Age. Archaeological evidence suggests that Iron Age people visited the site and left many votive offerings there, such as small objects or food. Similarly, many Bronze Age stone circles and burial sites continue to serve as ceremonial places where the living could pay homage to their forebears. The reuse of these spaces may reflect a belief that the ancestral spirits resided within the landscape itself, reinforcing the idea that the ancient structures were gateways to the other world, a realm inhabited by deities and spirits. Iron Age religious practices in Ireland seem to have been rooted in a worldview that saw the land, water, and natural features as imbued with spiritual power. The evidence we have of these practices comes from a combination of archaeological finds, classical sources, and comparisons with other Celtic cultures. Key elements of Iron Age religion in Ireland included the sacred landscapes, ritual focused on nature and fertility, veneration of ancestral spirits, and a potential pantheon of gods and goddesses associated with natural forces. In Iron Age Ireland, certain landscapes were considered sacred, particularly hills, rivers, and trees. Hills, often topped with hill forts or earthworks, were likely seen as points of contact between the human and spiritual worlds. For example, the Hill of Tara in County Meath, known as traditional seat of high kings in Ireland, was ceremonial and political centre with a deep spiritual dimension. Archaeological evidence suggests that Tara was used as a ritual site long before the Iron Age, but it continued to play a vital role in Iron Age religious life. It features, including the Mount of the Hostages, which is an ancient burial ground, and the Lia Fal, or the Stone of Destiny, illustrate how the Iron Age people of Ireland embraced the continuity of ancient sites and their spiritual power. Rivers and bodies of water also held a specific place in Iron Age religion. Finds from bogs and lakes across Ireland include a wealth of ritual offerings, particularly metal objects such as swords, spears, and jewellery, which were likely deposited as votive offerings. The discovery of these objects in watery locations suggests that rivers and lakes were seen as portals to the underworld, where the gods or spirits could receive these gifts. This practice was part of a broader Celtic tradition of depositional sacrifice, where valuable items were offered to deities in exchange for blessings or protection. Trees, particularly oaks, yews, and hazels, were venerated in Iron Age Ireland and across the Celtic world. The reverence for trees is evidenced in Irish mythology and later written sources, which indicate that specific groves or trees were considered sacred. These trees may have represented the presence of a deity or a spirit and served as sites where rituals were performed. The concept of the sacred tree likely had roots in Iron Age spirituality, connecting the Irish people with nature and symbolising the life force that permeated all things. One of the most intriguing aspects of Iron Age religion in Ireland is the practice of depositing objects and, in some cases, human bodies in bogs. Ireland's wetlands, with their dark, mysterious landscapes, were believed to be places where the barrier between the natural and supernatural worlds was thin. This belief is evident in the large number of votive deposits found in Irish bogs, including weapons, jewellery, and even musical instruments. which were likely intended as offerings to the gods or spirits of the land. Some of the most compelling evidence for sacrificial offerings comes from the discovery of bog bodies, human remains preserved by the acidic conditions of Ireland's peat bogs. These individuals, often well dressed and show signs of violent death, may have been ritually sacrificed, possibly as offerings to ensure fertility, success in warfare, or protection from disaster. Examples include the famous bog bodies of Old Crone Man and Clonycavan Man, both found in the Midlands. Their positioning, with bodies placed face down or bound, suggests ritualized killing, and they likely held significant symbolic value for the people who deposited them. It's also possible that some Iron Age sacrifices were made during critical times, such as the beginning or end of the agricultural cycle, to appease deities associated with fertility and harvest. These sacrifices would have served as acts of devotion, ensuring that the gods would grant favourable conditions for crops, livestock, and other aspects of survival. Although our understanding of Iron Age festivals is limited by the absence of written records, later sources in Irish folklore hint at a calendar of seasonal celebrations. Major festivals include Imbolg, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain are believed to have roots in the Iron Age, if not earlier. These festivals marked key points in the agricultural calendar, with each celebration corresponding to significant seasonal changes. Imbolg, or early February, was associated with the beginning of spring and renewal of the land, possibly dedicated to the goddess Breed, a deity of fertility and healing. Bealtaine, early May, marked the start of the summer and the growing season, with rituals involving fire intended to protect livestock and encourage fertility. Lunasa, early August, celebrated the first harvest and may have included games and feasting in honour of the god Lu, a deity of skill and the arts. Samhain, early November, marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter, with a focus on honouring the dead and acknowledging the thinning veil between worlds. Each of these festivals likely involved specific rituals, sacrifices, and community gatherings, providing an opportunity for the people to honour their deities and ancestors, seek protection, and ensure fertility. The timing of these festivals corresponds with the agricultural year, emphasising the Iron Age people's close relationship with nature and seasonal cycles. Iron Age communities did not abandon the monumental structures of their Neolithic and Bronze Age ancestors. Instead, they incorporated these ancient sites into their own religious practices, transforming them into places of Iron Age ceremony and reverence. Megalithic tombs, stone circles, and other sacred sites were not just remnants of the past, they were perceived as living connections to the ancestral spirits and spiritual forces. The Hill of Tara, for example, was originally a Bronze Age site, but became a central place of worship and political power during the Iron Age. Similarly, many stone circles and standing stones were used for new rituals or gatherings, reflecting a desire to establish continuity with the past while adapting the sites to meet Iron Age spiritual needs. The reuse of such monuments indicate a reverence for ancestry and tradition, suggesting that these communities viewed themselves as caretakers of an ancient spiritual heritage. Classical writers, particularly the Greek and Roman authors, provide brief yet valuable glimpses into Iron Age religious practice amongst the Celtic people. Although Ireland was never conquered by Rome, the accounts of writers such as Caesar, Strabo, and Pliny suggest that the Celtic societies had a class of religious elites known as druids. According to these sources, druids were responsible for officiating at ceremonies, interpreting omens, and acting as intermediaries between the human and spiritual realms. While there's no direct evidence confirms the existence of Druids in Ireland during the Iron Age, the widespread influence of Druidic practices in Celtic societies make it plausible that Irish religious practices included similar figures. These Druids or spiritual leaders may have conducted rituals at sacred sites, interpreted natural phenomena as messages from the gods, and maintained the cultural memory of ancestral traditions. However, much of what we know about Druids is filtered through Roman biases, and there's no direct archaeological evidence in Ireland to confirm their role. Iron Age religious practices in Ireland reveal a society deeply rooted in its ancestral past while adapting to new cultural and spiritual ideas. The continued use of Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments as ceremonial sites illustrates a profound respect for ancestral tradition and a belief in the sacred power of the land itself. Iron Age people saw themselves as custodians of a legacy passed down through generations, and they demonstrated this through their use of ancient sites. The Burren, a starkly beautiful karst landscape in County Clare, Ireland, has long fascinated archaeologists and historians. Its unique limestone formations, underground rivers, and expansive cave networks made it both a challenging and rewarding area for archaeological study. These caves, nestled within the Burren's rugged terrain, have preserved an abundance of artefacts, human remains, and other evidence that sheds light on the funerary and ritual practices of Ireland's ancient inhabitants. From the Neolithic through to the Bronze Age and Iron Ages, the Burren's cave systems served as burial sites, sacred places, and ceremonial grounds for diverse communities, reflecting a long history of spiritual beliefs and reverence for the dead. The Burren is renowned for its karst landscape, a region of exposed landscape that has eroded over millennia to create a network of caves, fissures, and sinkholes. These geological features made the Burren an ideal area for underground burials and ritual activities. In ancient Ireland, caves were often perceived as liminal spaces, or thresholds between the earthly and otherworldly realms. Caves, dark, mysterious interiors made them natural sites for encounters with the spiritual world, housing the spirits of ancestors, gods, or other supernatural beings. Archaeologists have uncovered multiple burial and ritual sites within the Burren's caves, with evidence spanning several thousand years. These findings reveal that the Burren's cave systems were considered sacred, offering a secluded, protected environment for conducting ceremonies, storing remains, and depositing offerings to the gods. The caves likely held particular significance as places for rites of passage, ancestor veneration, and other communal practices. Some of the earliest evidence of human use of the Burren's caves dates back to the Neolithic period, roughly 4000 to 2500 BCE. During this time, Ireland's first agricultural communities began settling the land, bringing with them the range of spiritual and funerary traditions. The Neolithic people of Ireland are known for constructing monumental tombs, but they also utilised natural caves as burial sites. For instance, Paul na Brón Dolmen, one of Ireland's most famous portal tombs, is located in the Burren and was used for both primary and secondary burials. Nearby caves served a similar purpose, accommodating skeletal remains, artefacts, and offerings. Inside these caves, archaeologists have found bones that suggest a complex burial process. In some cases, bodies were defleshed or partially dismembered before interment, a practice that may indicate a form of ritualized ancestor worship. This preparation process, which involved careful handling and manipulation of the bones, suggests that the deceased were thought to retain a spiritual presence even after death. By burying their dead within the caves, Neolithic communities may have believed that they were entrusting them to a realm that bridged the worlds of the living and the supernatural. Artefacts uncovered in these burial caves also provide clues about the ritual practices of Neolithic people. Some caves contain items such as stone tools, pottery fragments, beads, and animal bones, suggesting that the offerings were made to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. These objects likely held symbolic meaning, perhaps intended to protect or aid the departed in the spiritual world. The inclusion of animal bones may indicate sacrificial practices, where livestock or game was offered to appease the spirits and honour the dead. The Bronze Age, 2500 to 600 BCE, brought significant social and technological changes to Ireland, including advancements in metalworking, and introduced bronze tools, weapons, and decorative items. During this period, the use of caves for ritual and burial practices continued, with some changes in the types of offerings and burial customs. The caves of the Burren remained important as ceremonial and burial sites, with evidence suggesting that they were both used for individual and communal interments. In several Burren caves, archaeologists have found skeletal remains that indicate secondary burial practices. Secondary burials involve the intentional rearrangement or removal of bones after the initial decomposition of the body. This practice may suggest that the dead were revisited by the living, possibly as part of ritual commemoration or ancestor veneration ceremonies. In some cases, bones were arranged in specific patterns, perhaps as part of symbolic displays or to represent particular spiritual beliefs. The positioning and curation of these remains indicate that Bronze Age people viewed the dead as powerful spiritual presences that could continue to influence the world of the living. Bronze artefacts, including tools, ornaments, and weapons, have also been found in these cave sites, perhaps left as votive offerings. The deposition of valuable metal items reflects a tradition of sacrificial giving, where prized possessions were left in the caves or as gifts to deities or spirits. The practice of offering valuable items indicates that these rituals were not taken lightly. They were likely required a significant investment from individuals or communities. Given the Burren's isolated landscape, the journey to these cave sites may have been part of the ritual itself, symbolising a physical and spiritual pilgrimage. Animal bones discovered in Bronze Age cave burials suggest a continuation of sacrificial practices. The remains of cattle, sheep, and other animals indicate that offerings were made within the caves to accompany the dead or to appease supernatural forces. The presence of these animal remains underscores the spiritual importance of the cave sites, which served as places where people could commune with the divine through sacrificial rites. The Iron Age, 600 BCE to 400 CE, in Ireland was a time of cultural change and increased interaction with other Celtic societies across Europe. During this period, the Burren's caves continued to serve as ritual spaces, with evidence of Iron Age burials and offerings preserved within the dark recesses of the underground chambers. Although the Iron Age is less well documented than earlier periods, archaeological evidence points to a continuity of ancestral passages within the Burren's caves. Human remains discovered in the Burren Cave system from the Iron Age indicate that these sites retained their sacred status over thousands of years. Some of these remains bear signs of intentional deposition, suggesting that specific rituals were performed in the presence of the deceased. Archaeologists have found both whole and partial skeletons in these caves, possibly indicating the practice of excarnation, or exposing the body to the elements or animals to remove flesh, prior to final interment within the cave. This process of excarnation, similar to earlier practices, reflects a belief in the transformative journey of the dead from the physical to the spiritual realm. Offerings in Iron Age caves also included iron tools, pottery fragments, and animal remains, pointing to continued ritual activity. The presence of these items in caves context suggests that the Iron Age communities maintained a deep connection with their ancestral past, conducting ceremonies in spaces that were linked to earlier generations. The reoccurrence of animal remains, particularly in the forms of butchered bones, may indicate sacrificial practices, where livestock was ritually slaughtered as an offering to appease the gods or honour the spirits of the dead. Throughout the Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age, the Burren's caves were more than just burial sites. They were liminal spaces where the boundaries between the human and spiritual worlds blurred. In ancient Irish beliefs, caves symbolised entryways to the other world, a realm inhabited by gods, spirits, and the souls of the dead. The underground nature of caves, with their cool, dark interiors, evoked a sense of mystery and otherworldliness. By entering the caves, ancient Irish people may have felt that they were venturing into the sacred domain of their ancestors and the gods. The consistent use of the Burren's caves over millennia suggests that these spaces held enduring spiritual significance. They provided a secluded environment that shielded ritual activity from the outside world, preserving the sanctity of ceremonies that honoured the dead and communicated with the divine. The physical journey into the caves, as well as the experience of darkness and isolation, may have heightened the spiritual intensity of these rites, allowing participants to feel more deeply connected with the supernatural. Among the most significant Burren cave sites is a complex at Glencurran Cave, where human remains, animal bones, pottery shards, and other artefacts have been found. This cave contains evidence of a continued use across the Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age, with the site possibly serving as a place for communal burials and offerings. The mix of human and animal remains, combined with the presence of crafted objects, indicates that Glencurran Cave was a site of considerable ritual importance. The artefacts suggest it may have been a meeting place for seasonal ceremonies or gatherings, reinforcing the role of the Burren's caves as communal spiritual places. Another notable cave site is Poulnabrone, which contains artefacts and remains from both the Bronze Age and Iron Ages. The positioning of bones and offerings within Poulnabrone suggests that rituals were performed with a great deal of care and reverence, indicating a belief on the ongoing influence of the deceased. Files within Poulnabrone and the other Burren caves continue to inform archaeologists about the complex spiritual life of ancient Irish communities. The caves of the Burren, used from Neolithic through to the Iron Age, are a testament to the enduring spiritual beliefs of ancient Ireland. For thousands of years, these subterranean spaces provided a secluded sanctuaries for the dead and places for the living to engage in rituals honouring the gods and ancestors. As liminal spaces, the Burren's caves represented the threshold between worlds, offering access to the divine and a connection to the past. Through burials, customs, sacrificial offerings, and carefully arranged artefacts, the ancient Irish communities who used the Burren's caves left behind a legacy that speaks to their profound connection to the natural world, their ancestors, and the divine. The enduring use of the site suggests that the people of the Burren viewed these caves not merely as physical locations but as sacred portals to the otherworld, a realm where the spirits of the deceased, deities, and supernatural forces resided. The Burren's cave rituals and funerary customs also reveal the symbolic importance of the journey into darkness as part of these ancient spiritual practices. The act of descending into the cave may have also been seen as a passage into a womb-like space of transformation, where the dead could rest or be reborn in the other world. This concept is echoed in other ancient cultures worldwide, where caves often represent the earth's womb and the mysterious cycle of death and rebirth. In the Burren, the journey into the depths of these cave systems may have been carried similarly symbolic meaning, allowing participants to experience a journey that mirrored the passage of the soul. As Iron Age communities continued to use these caves, the Burren became layered with memories, rituals, and spiritual meaning accumulated over generations. Each act of burial, each offering left, each ritual performed connected people to their forebears and reaffirmed their relationship with the land. By using these caves as sites of ritual activity and burial, the people of the Burren embedded their spiritual beliefs within the landscape, creating a sacred geometry that has left an indelible mark on the Irish cultural heritage. Today, the archaeological findings within the Burren's caves offer a glimpse into the lives and beliefs of ancient Irish communities. These discoveries, from intricate burial customs to votive deposits, help modern researchers understand how the people of the Burren perceived life, death, and the afterlife. They reveal a worldview that valued continuity, ancestral reverence, and a deep-rooted connection to the land. The Burren's cave systems thus remain a powerful testament to Ireland's ancient spiritual heritage, preserving the echoes of rituals that once shaped the lives and beliefs of its people. Investigating Ireland's ancient religious practices faces significant challenges due to limitations and biases of both classical accounts and early Irish manuscripts. As much of Ireland's pre-Christian religious history was passed down orally, a direct written record of ancient beliefs and practices simply doesn't exist. What we do know is drawn from the complex interplay of archaeological evidence, the observances of classical writers, and medieval Irish manuscripts, each of which presents interpretive challenges. This part of the video explores these sources' limitations and assesses how they impact our understanding of ancient Irish spirituality. The earliest written records mentioning the people of Ireland came from classic Greco-Roman writers, whose accounts date from roughly the 4th century BCE onwards. While these authors provide some of the first external observations on the Celts, including those in Ireland, their writings are limited by cultural biases, geographical distances, and at times a lack of first-hand knowledge. Writers such as Strabo, Pomponius, Mela, and Deirdre Siculus mentioned the customs of the Celts, but often generalised or misinterpreted their cultural practices. To these Greco-Roman authors, the Celts were mysterious and exotic people on the fringes of the known world, leading them to depict Celtic customs in exaggerated or romanticised ways. For example, accounts which describe ritual sacrifices or headhunting may have been influenced by misunderstandings or outright sensationalism, intended to portray the Celts as barbaric in contrast to the civilised societies of Greece and Rome. Julius Caesar's Commentary de Bello Gallicio, or commentaries on the Gallic War, offer some of the most detailed accounts of the Celtic world and its religious practices, but his focus was in Gaul, not Ireland. While he describes Druids and their role in Celtic society, his portrayal is both propagandistic and heavily skewed towards the Gallic Celts, who are politically and culturally distinct from those in Ireland. Caesar's writings served his own political agenda, justifying his campaigns by portraying the Celts as potential threats to Rome. This, in turn, likely coloured his descriptions of their religion as well, emphasising aspects that would support his imperial ambitions. Even when classical authors wrote about Ireland specifically, their observations were often speculative, second-hand, or shaped by lack of direct experience. Tacitus, for example, commented on the geography and culture of Ireland, but he never visited the island. As a result, classical sources offer valuable clues but are not reliable as primary evidence of Irish religious practices. They tend to lack nuanced understanding and reflect external perceptions rather than authentic insights into Ireland's spiritual life. The earliest written accounts of Irish myths, legends, and cultural practices come from medieval Irish manuscripts created centuries after the arrival of Christianity in Ireland. Manuscripts such as the Labor Gabála Éireann, or the Book of Invasions, the Dishinkas, or the Lower Places, and the Táin Bo Cullinge, or the Cattle of Cooley, provide detailed narratives about the gods, heroes, and mythical history of Ireland. While these manuscripts are invaluable for understanding Irish culture, they present complex challenges for those seeking to reconstruct Ireland's ancient religious practices. Ireland was converted to Christianity in the 5th century CE, and by the time these manuscripts were written, Christian monks and scribes dominated Irish intellectual life. These monks preserved and transcribed Irish oral traditions, but did so within a Christian framework. Many of these scribes were educated in Latin and familiar with biblical and classical literature, which influenced their worldview. Consequently, the stories they recorded often reflect a blending of Christian and pre-Christian elements, making it difficult to separate authentic pagan beliefs from Christian interpretations. One example is the portrayal of figures like the Tuatha Dé Danann, a mythical race of gods and heroes in Irish tradition. In the manuscripts, these deities are sometimes portrayed as quasi-historical figures or demoted to supernatural beings rather than full-fledged gods. This may have been a way for Christian scribes to incorporate these figures without directly endorsing polytheistic beliefs. In other instances, Christian motifs appear within stories originally rooted in paganism, such as reference to God or moral judgments that align with Christian teaching. This incorporation also reflects Christian monks' efforts to align Irish lore with their own beliefs, diminishing the distinctly pagan character of the stories. The Irish manuscripts also reflect the social and cultural values of the medieval period, often more than those of a pre-Christian Ireland. When monastic scribes compiled stories of mythical cycles, they may have altered elements to reflect the moral, legal, and social norms of their own time. For example, kinship, social hierarchy, and moral codes embedded in these stories may mirror the Christianized value of early medieval Ireland rather than those of the pagan past. The Táin Bo Cullinge, for example, emphasizes warrior values and reflects a social structure that may owe to much the influence of contemporary monastic patronage and political conflicts as it does to ancient cultural values. Scribes also adapted certain stories to fit with medieval literary styles and audiences, potentially enhancing themes that would resonate with the readers. This adaptation often obscures the original context or intent of pre-Christian myths, making it challenging for modern scholars to discern authentic elements of ancient spirituality. One key challenge on relying on the Irish manuscripts for the insights into pre-Christian beliefs is that they contain syncretic elements, where pagan and Christian ideas blend together. Over time, Irish folklore and mythology underwent a process of synchronization, which integrated Christian theology with older Celtic traditions. As a result, some figures and practices may have been altered or repurposed to fit in with Christian worldview. The example of the Feast of Christian Saints, for example, was sometimes timed to align with seasonal festivals that had pre-Christian roots, resulting in a fusion of religious observances that preserved some ancient elements in a new Christianized form. The festival of Samhain, traditionally marking the end of the harvest season, was later associated with the Christian observance of All Saints' Day. This alignment preserved aspects of the older festival, such as the idea of thinning boundary between worlds, but it also integrated Christian concepts of the afterlife and sainthood. Such syncretism can obscure the original meaning and significance of these festivals, complicating efforts to reconstruct authentic ancient practices. Despite their limitations, the Irish manuscripts remain valuable for understanding elements of ancient belief systems. Scholars often examine them critically, comparing motifs across various manuscripts and considering the historical context in which they were written. Nonetheless, significant caution is necessary in interpreting these sources as evidence of ancient religious practices. These texts offer only glimpses of a much older belief system that had already undergone profound change. In some cases, Irish manuscripts offer indirect evidence of ancient spiritual practices. They may contain descriptions of ritual, seasonal festivals, or supernatural beings that hint at long-standing cultural beliefs. For example, the reverence shown to nature spirits, sacred wells, and specific landscape features reflects a respect for natural forces that likely predated Christianity. Similarly, references to rituals involving sacred groves, burial mounds, or ancient sites suggest that pre-Christian Irish spirituality placed a strong emphasis on the landscape as a spiritual entity. Although the manuscripts were written centuries after Christianization, they often preserved oral traditions passed down over generations. While Christian scribes influenced these stories, certain motifs may trace back to the Ireland's pre-Christian past. Folk tales and legends that survived in popular tradition can sometimes offer insights into ancient beliefs and practices, even if they have evolved over time. For example, beliefs surrounding the Sidhe, or fairy folk, may preserve echoes of older practices associated with ancient worship or veneration of the land. The classical accounts in Irish manuscripts together form a fragmented, complex patchwork of evidence for understanding ancient Irish religion. While classical resources provide external perspective that offer some insight into the Celtic world, they are unreliable as primary sources of Irish practices. Irish manuscripts, meanwhile, are invaluable for preserving a wealth of mythological material but present their own interpretive challenges, having been shaped by the values and beliefs of the Christianized society in which they were compiled. For those seeking to reconstruct Ireland's pre-Christian spiritual practices, these sources require careful analysis, critical comparison, and contextual understanding. Even with these resources, much remains speculative. The influence of Christianity and the monastic scribes' reworking of myth means that a precise understanding of Ireland's ancient religion is elusive. However, by studying these manuscripts alongside archaeological and folklore evidence, scholars can piece together either a partial but evocative picture of Ireland's ancient spiritual heritage, providing a foundation upon which modern interpretations and revivals have been built. Ireland's ancient calendar was closely intertwined with the natural cycles and agricultural rhythms of the land, giving rise to annual festivals that marked the passing of seasons, the cycles of growth and decay, and the movement between light and darkness. Four major festivals, Imulug, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain, are thought to have structured the ritual year of pre-Christian Ireland, reflecting a worldview that celebrated and honoured these transitions. Each festival corresponded to significant agricultural or pastoral milestones, suggesting a close connection between spiritual observances and the natural environment. However, determining the precise religious practices and meanings behind these festivals is challenging. Evidence for the observance of these festivals come primarily from the combination of early Irish manuscripts, folklore, archaeological findings, and later historical accounts. This part of the video delves into each of these festivals, examining the available evidence and attempting to piece together their potential significance and associated rites. Imulug, which falls in early February, is believed to mark the beginning of spring in the Irish ritual calendar. Named possibly from the Old Irish Mulug, meaning in the belly, Imulug is closely associated with themes of renewal, fertility, and purification. This festival celebrates the end of winter's harshness as well as the first signs of life returning to land. In agricultural terms, Imulug was significant as it coincided with the lambing season, a crucial time for pastoral communities. Early Irish manuscripts such as the Labáir Gabála Éireann mention Imulug indirectly through associations with Bridget, an important figure in Irish mythology, who was later canonised as an Irish Christian saint. Bridget was seen as a goddess of fertility, poetry, healing, and protection. Folklore surrounding St. Bridget's Day on February 1st preserves customs that have roots in pre-Christian worship, including the crafting of Bridget's crosses and straw dolls, as well as rituals involving wells and fire. This association suggests that the Christian St. Bridget may have taken on attributes of a pre-Christian goddess or protective deity worshipped at Imulug. Evidence for Imulug practices can be found in traditions surrounding holy wells, which were revered in pre-Christian Ireland and may have served as places of pilgrimage and ritual cleansing during Imulug. Wells dedicated to St. Bridget or other figures have folklore attached to them that emphasise their healing powers and connections to the goddess. Although direct archaeological evidence of Imulug's specific ritual is rare, the continuity of well traditions suggests a possible link to ancient purification practices that would have marked the arrival of spring. Bealtaine, celebrated on May the 1st, marks the beginning of summer and is deeply associated with fire protection and fertility. This festival was primarily pastoral, coinciding with the time when livestock were moved to summer pastures. Bealtaine was seen as a time when the boundaries between worlds were thin, requiring protective measures to ensure safety for people, animals, and crops as they transitioned to the warmer months. Irish folklore preserves numerous customs that reflect Bealtaine's protective and purifying functions. Traditionally, large bonfires were lit on Bealtaine Eve, and people and animals were driven between the fires as a form of ritual purification and protection. This practice, referenced in various manuscripts and historic records, is thought to have symbolised the burning away of winter's lingering darkness and invokes blessings for a fruitful summer. Fire, a potent symbol of life and transformation, was central to Bealtaine celebrations, and the smoke was believed to carry protective power. While archaeological evidence specific to Bealtaine is scarce, certain ancient sites display alignments that may connect with Bealtaine's season timing. For example, the hill of Uisneach in County Westmeath, believed to be a significant ritual centre, was associated with the festival. Folklore tells of great fires being lit on Uisneach summit, which could be seen across the countryside. This tradition of lighting fires at hilltop sites reflects the symbolic power of fire and as a means of communication and connection. The prominence of Uisneach, combined with its association with Bealtaine fire, suggests it was once a gathering place for communal rituals aimed at securing prosperity for the coming summer months. Lunasa was held around August the 1st, marks the beginning of the harvest season, and is often associated with the god Lu, a deity of skill, craftsmanship, and light. Lunasa was a time to celebrate the first fruits of the harvest and pay homage to the land's abundance. As the festival of harvest starts, Lunasa rites and customs were likely centred on ensuring a bountiful season and expressing gratitude to the deities and the spirits of the land. Medieval manuscripts such as the Book of Invasions and the Ulster Cycle mention Lunasa gatherings, often associated with fairs, games, and community feasting. The god Lu is said to have instituted the festival in honour of his foster mother, Taltu, who died after clearing the land for agriculture. The story suggests that Lunasa was linked to honouring the ancestors and the land itself, recognising the toil involved in agricultural productivity. Archaeological sites associated with Lunasa often include high places like hills and mountains, which served as gathering points for communities to celebrate the harvest. One notable example is the hill of Taltu in County Meath, named after Lu's foster mother, where Lunasa gatherings reportedly took place. Excavations at various hilltop locations across Ireland have revealed signs of feasting and large-scale gatherings, though direct evidence trying tiny sites Lunasa specifically is challenging to confirm. However, the continued tradition of Patron Day, local feast days on and around August the 1st, suggests that hill gatherings and celebratory events had deep roots in the agricultural calendar. Samhain, observed at the end of October, marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. It was a time when the boundary between the human world and the other world was believed to be at its thinnest, allowing spirits and supernatural beings to cross over more easily. Samhain's significance as a festival of transition and remembrance of the dead is well documented in folklore, and later medieval accounts, but directly archaeological evidence remains limited. Medieval Irish tales often describe Samhain as a time when powerful events occurred, such as the opening of fairy mounts or the She, and encounters with supernatural beings. Texts like the Tain Bo Colina mentions Samhain as a time where warriors would gather, signalling a sense of heightened activity during this period. Such tales suggest that Samhain held a particular significance as a liminal time, a belief that likely rooted in ancient pre-Christian traditions. Some ancient sites appear to be oriented towards the Samhain sunrise or sunset, hinting at ritual observances during this time. For instance, the megalithic tomb on Carnell on Slieve na Cally in County Meath is aligned with the setting sun on Samhain, illuminating the tomb's passageway. This alignment suggests that Samhain was an important observance for ancient communities, with the tomb acting as a place for ritual activity and perhaps even ancestor veneration. The fire festivals associated with Samhain are reflected in folklore, with traditions of lighting bonfires to protect against wandering spirits or malevolent beings. These fires may have originally served as means of lighting the way for the dead or ensuring communal safety against supernatural threats, though much of this meaning has been obscured by later Christian interpretations of Halloween. As Christianity spread across Ireland, these ancient festivals underwent transformations, often merging with Christian celebrations. Imullig became associated with St. Bridget's Day, Bealtaine and Lunasa maintained localised patron days or fairs, and Samhain merged with All Saints or All Souls celebrations, evolving into modern Halloween. Despite transformations, remnants of these festivals survive in folk traditions that continue to be observed into the modern era. From customs of lighting bonfires on Bealtaine to honouring the dead at Samhain, the persistence of these practices underscore their importance as a rhythm of life in Ireland. They provide valuable insights into the ways in which ancient Irish communities interacted with their environment, venerated their deities, and acknowledged the cyclical nature of life, death, and renewal. In summary, the evidence for these annual religious festivals is found across manuscripts, folklore, and archaeological alignments, but much remains speculative. These festivals were likely rooted in an agrarian worldview that honoured seasonal changes and connected communities to their environment, deities, and ancestors. While later Christian influence reshaped these observances, the endurance of their core elements highlights their profound role in the lives of ancient Ireland's people and their cultural identity. The folk practices that have survived in Ireland, often hidden in plain sight within rural communities, offer a fascinating glimpse into the enduring beliefs and customs of pre-Christian Ireland. These elements of folk magic handed down through generations provide a vital clue to the belief systems of ancient Irish people who lived closely to the natural world and wove spiritual significance into their daily lives. Such practices reflect an underlying reverence for the land, ancestors, and unseen forces, suggesting that aspects of early Irish religion have persisted in various forms even after the Christianization of Ireland. Many elements of folk magic, such as charms, herbal remedies, protective symbols, and seasonal rituals, demonstrate a continuity of belief that may trace back to pre-Christian customs. These practices, while altered by time and religious shifts, likely contain remnants of ancient Irish spirituality, offering a window into the past that written records alone cannot provide. By examining these folk traditions in greater detail, we can gain insight into the ways the ancient Irish may have related to their deities, nature, and the supernatural, and how they sought to influence and protect their lives through ritual actions. Healing and herbalism are amongst the most persistent elements of Irish folk magic, rooted in ancient understanding of the natural world as a source of both sustenance and healing power. The use of plants for medicine purposes is deeply embedded in Irish folk tradition, as certain plants were believed to possess special spiritual properties, making them vital components of both physical and spiritual healing. Holy wells, which dot the Irish landscape, are a prime example of how healing practices in Irish folk magic may have ancient origins. Long before Christian saints were associated with these wells, it is believed that they were revered as sources of healing and sacred power. People visited wells to seek cures for ailments, leaving offerings such as coins, flowers, or strips of cloth tied to nearby trees, as a custom known as a tree. This practice reflects a belief that the well's spirit or deity who could be placated or honoured with these small gifts. The waters from these wells were thought to hold healing properties, often linked to specific ailments, and some wells were associated with particular cures, such as for eye problems or skin diseases. Wells dedicated to St. Bridget, one of Ireland's most venerated figures, are especially popular, suggesting that pre-Christian water deities may have been reimagined as saints in the Christian era. The rituals surrounding holy wells and the continued observance of specific feast days for these wells hint at an unbroken line of belief in the sacredness of water and its power to heal. Ancient herbal knowledge also survived in folk medicine, with many plants believed to hold protective or curative powers. For example, the elder tree, rowan, and hawthorn were commonly used in protective charms, with hawthorn particularly associated with fairies and supernatural protection. Elderberries were thought to ward off evil, and people who carried a piece of rowan or hawthorn as talismans to protect against curses or malevolent spirits. Likewise, the yarrow plant was believed to hold healing powers and was used as poultices to stop bleeding or ease pain. These deep-rooted tradition of herbalism suggests a worldview in which plants and trees were viewed as conduits of spiritual energy. The knowledge of which plants could be used for purposes and specific rituals involved in their gathering and use reflect a strong connection to the land and its cycles, one that likely predates Christianity and persisted quietly in rural communities. Protective charms and symbols intended to ward off harm, illness, or supernatural interference were also a common feature in Irish folk magic. Many of these practices likely derive from ancient beliefs in the presence of otherworldly forces that could impact human lives for good or ill. Through the use of charms, symbols, and actions, people sought to protect themselves, their families, and their livelihoods from negative influences. One common folk belief is the protective power of iron. Iron objects, such as nails or horseshoes, were often placed above doorways or near cradles to ward off malevolent forces, particularly fairies. It was thought that iron, a metal linked to industry and strength, could repel supernatural entities and keep a household safe. Similarly, red thread or cloth, often tied around children's wrists or woven into livestock's manes, was believed to provide protection from the evil eye or from being overlooked, a term used to describe curses or ill wishes. One of the most enduring symbols of protection is the Bridget's cross, traditionally woven from rushes or straw on the eve of St. Bridget's Day, or February 1st, and placed above doorways or on walls. This cross is believed to safeguard homes and livestock from fire, disease, and misfortune. The making of Bridget's crosses likely connects to pre-Christian practices associated with the goddess Breed, suggesting a protective rite that was reinterpreted within Christian framework but retained its apotrophic or evil warding function. Similar charms, such as rowan crosses or bundles of herbs hung up in a home, were placed with the intent of evoking protection from unseen forces. Seasonal rituals in Irish folk tradition often correspond to the ancient festival dates of Imulloch, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain, hinting at underlying structure of ritual observances aligned with the agricultural year. While these practices have evolved over centuries, they likely retain elements of pre-Christian seasonal rites reflecting the cyclical nature of life and the need to honour transition periods. Bealtaine, marking the start of summer, was celebrated with fire rituals intending to purify and protect. The custom of driving cattle between two bonfires protected them from disease, and largely abandoned today, was recorded by Irish folklorists well into the 19th century. The smoke from these fires is thought to offer a protective barrier, and it was believed that ancient communities lit such fires to invoke blessings for the livestock and crops. Today, remnants of this tradition persist in smaller celebrations and now serves as a living example of how seasonal rituals in folk magic might stem from pre-Christian practices. Samhain, which marks the end of harvest and beginning of winter, was regarded as a liminal time when the boundary between worlds was thin. This belief was reflected in customs around Samhain, including lighting candles or bonfires to guide spirits and leaving food offerings for deceased relatives. Today, some of these practices have merged with Halloween customs, but the idea of honouring the dead and acknowledging their presence during this season reflects the ancient belief in ancestor reverence and the importance of maintaining a connection with the spiritual world. The belief in fairies, or the Éisi, is one of the most unique aspects of Irish folk tradition. Though often romanticised today, these beings were originally regarded as with both respect and fear. People believed that fairies, as inhabitants of the otherworld, could influence human affairs, particularly if their domain, such as certain trees, hills, or ancient sites, were disturbed. Certain trees, particularly hawthorns, were considered sacred and were left undisturbed to avoid offending the fairies. Known as fairy trees, these lone hawthorns were often found standing alone in fields or near ancient sites and were considered untouchable. Farmers would go great lengths to avoid harming them, even if it meant adjusting the layout of their fields. This belief in the protective powers of certain trees and the reverence in which they were treated suggests a residual animistic view of nature, where specific places were inhabited by spirits or supernatural forces. To avoid angering the fairies, people would often leave a small offering at fairy forts or ancient ring forts or mounds believed to be the entrances to the otherworld. These offerings, typically food or drink, were made to placate the fairies and to ensure that they would not cause misfortune. Folklorists have recorded accounts of families who maintained these practices well into the modern era, emphasising the longevity and significance of these customs in rural Ireland. While Ireland's transition to Christianity reshaped the spiritual landscape, many folk practices retained elements of ancient beliefs, adapted within a Christian framework. Folk magic practices, whether through the use of protective symbols, reverence for natural sites, or adherence to seasonal rites, demonstrate the persistence of a worldview that sees the natural and supernatural as deeply interconnected. These practices reflect an understanding of life in a cyclical, with spiritual forces inhabiting the landscape and human life needing their protection and favour. In studying Irish folk magic, we gain a rare glimpse into the continuity of ancient beliefs that survived under the surface of Christianised Ireland. These practices may have evolved over time, but they reveal a rich tapestry of belief that links the Irish people of today with their pre-Christian ancestors. Through these customs, we can trace elements of Ireland's ancient religious practices, echoes of an old spirituality that survived not through texts, but in lived experiences of those who carried these customs right into the present day. The Celtic revival, which flourished in Ireland in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, marked a powerful resurgence of interest in Ireland's ancient culture, language, and spirituality. This period sought a revitalisation of Irish identity and heritage, and as part of this movement there was a renewed fascination with the myths, folklore, and religious practices of Ireland's pre-Christian past. With the advent of modern New Age spiritual movements in the 20th century, Irish mythology and ancient spirituality were further reinterpreted and reshaped, often blending with other philosophies to form new expressions of spiritual practice. Both the Celtic revival and New Age movements have played a significant role in how Ireland's ancient religious practice are viewed today, yet they also present interpretive challenges as scholars and practitioners work to separate historical fact from modern imagination. The Celtic Revival, also known as the Irish Literary Revival, was a period marked by a resurgence in Irish cultural nationalism, coinciding with Ireland's political push for independence from British rule. Figures such as W.B. Yeats, Lady Augusta Gregory, and Douglas Hyde were key players in this movement, and are deeply inspired by Ireland's mythological and folkloric heritage. Their works celebrated and romanticised the ancient Celtic past, seeing it as a source of national pride and identity. The revivalists drew heavily on Irish mythology, drawing upon texts like the Báir Gabála Éireann, the Book of Invasions, the Ultra Cycle, and the Fenian Cycle, to inspire a renewed sense of Irish identity. For many involved in the Celtic Revival, this period was not only about reclaiming a distinct cultural and political identity for Ireland, but also about rediscovering a lost spirituality that was tied to the land and its people. The revivalists, particularly Yeats, were interested in the mythical and esoteric elements of Irish tradition, while they viewed as holding deep spiritual truths. Yeats, for instance, was heavily involved with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and was believed that Irish mythology contained hidden mystical meanings that could be accessed through poetry and other forms of artistic expression. This resurgence led to the popularisation of many mythological figures such as the goddess Bridget, Cuchulainn, and the Tuatha Danann, but it also came with challenges. While the revivalists sought to celebrate and honour Ireland's ancient past, their understanding of Celtic spirituality was often coloured by the romanticisation of time and limited access to historical sources. Much of what was known about Ireland's pre-Christian religious practices came from medieval manuscripts written by Christian monks, so the revivalists had to rely on these later interpretations of ancient beliefs, which often blended pagan and Christian elements. The Celtic Revival also contributed to the resurgence of the Irish language, as many revivalists saw the language as a vital link to Ireland's ancient culture and worldview. Groups like the Gaelic League promoted the use of Irish and aimed to reconnect people with the worldview inherent in the language, which they believed contained echoes of pre-Christian Celtic spirituality. By the mid-20th century, the rise of the New Age movement brought further reinterpretations of ancient Irish spirituality. New Age practitioners in Europe and North America were drawn to the mystique of Celtic culture and mythology, seeing it as an alternative to the more mainstream religions. This interest gave birth to various neo-pagan movements, including neo-druidry, modern Wicca, and Celtic reconstructionist paganism, which sought to recreate or reinterpret aspects of Celtic spirituality, often combining ancient symbols, deities, and festivals with contemporary spiritual practices. Neo-druidry in particular saw a significant revival with groups such as the Order of Bards of Waits and Druids and the British Druid Order, forming to explore and practice what they viewed as the continuation of ancient Druidic traditions. Although inspired by ancient Celtic culture, these modern Druidic practices are largely reconstructions, drawing on historical fragments, folklore, and sometimes New Age philosophies rather than direct continuations of ancient rituals. Neo-Druids and other Celtic-inspired spiritual practitioners celebrate festivals such as Imulach, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain, drawing connections to agricultural and season cycles that ancient communities may have honoured. Many of these New Age interpretations present challenges for historical accuracy, as they often blend elements from various Celtic cultures, Irish, Welsh, and Scottish, and other unrelated traditions. Practitioners have reimagined the ancient Celtic pantheon, redefined festivals, and incorporated foreign spiritual elements, resulting in a highly eclectic interpretation of Celtic spirituality. Despite this, New Age practitioners often view these reinterpreted practices as a valid expression of a spirituality that resonates with Ireland's ancient roots and nature-orientated worldview. Theosophy and occultism had a significant influence on the interpretation of Irish spirituality during the 20th century. Theosophical teachings, which sought to synthesize Eastern and Western mystical traditions, often encouraged an exploration of ancient belief systems, and Celtic spirituality was no exception. Figures such as George Russell and Ella Young were both part of the Celtic revival and had theosophical influences that encouraged them to look at Irish mythology through an esoteric lens. Theosophical and occult interpretations introduced ideas of karma, reincarnation, and cosmic energies into the interpretations of Celtic mythology and spirituality. These influences led some practitioners and scholars to view the ancient Irish gods and myths as symbolic representations of universal truths or archetypes rather than literal beliefs or practices of the past. This approach, however, diverged considerably from historic reality, as it projected a modern worldview onto the beliefs of ancient Irish communities. One of the major legacies of both Celtic revival and New Age movements is the romanticisation of Celtic spirituality. Ancient Irish practices were often reimagined as nature worshipping, peaceful, and mystical, reflecting modern ideals rather than historical realities. In popular imagination, the Druids became figures of wisdom and harmony with nature, even though historical sources depicting the Druids as performing complex social, legal, and religious roles, some which may have included animal and, in rare cases, human sacrifices. This romanticised view of Celtic spirituality has often overshadowed the more complex and pragmatic realities of ancient Irish religion. Many modern portrayals emphasise harmony, personal transformation, and individual spiritual journeys, which reflect contemporary spiritual value but may not accurately represent the communal, ritualistic, and often austere aspects of ancient practices. In response to the eclecticism of Neo-Druidry and New Age Celtic spirituality, some practitioners in the late 20th century formed the Celtic Reconstructionist pagan movement. Unlike Neo-Druids, Celtic Reconstructionists aimed to build a historically accurate, culturally specific form of Irish and Celtic spirituality based on rigorous research into archaeology, folklore, and historical texts. They sought to revive what they saw as authentic ancient practices rather than blend them with modern spiritual philosophies. Celtic Reconstructionists often emphasised the importance of ancestral worship, community values, and historical accuracy. They look into medieval texts, archaeological records, and folk traditions as source for reconstructing a practice that would have resonated with the beliefs of pre-Christian Ireland. Celtic Reconstruction paganism thus represents a response to the idealised and often historical interpretations of Irish spirituality, aiming to root its practices into the realities of early Irish society and culture. The Celtic Revival and New Age movements have undoubtedly had a lasting impact on how people view ancient Irish spirituality. These movements have inspired a renewed interest in Ireland's mythological and religious past and have made figures like Bridget and the Tuatha Dé Danann widely recognised symbols of Celtic spirituality. They also fostered a sense of pride in Ireland's ancient heritage, encouraging people to explore their roots and reclaim a spirituality that was often suppressed or forgotten under colonial and Christian influences. However, these reinterpretations have also led to the blending and reshaping of Ireland's spiritual heritage, creating new forms of spirituality that, while valid in their own right, may not accurately reflect the beliefs of ancient Irish communities. This complex legacy highlights both the creative potential and the challenges of reviving ancient practices in a modern context. In the end, the Celtic Revival and New Age movements serve as reminders of the evolving nature of spirituality and identity. While ancient Irish practices may never be fully recoverable, the continued interest in Ireland's mythological and spiritual heritage demonstrates the enduring appeal of a worldview that emphasises deep connection to nature and community and the unseen forces of the world. Through this lens, modern practitioners and scholars alike find ways to honour and reinterpret the spiritual legacy of ancient Ireland, keeping it alive for future generations. Modern Irish druidry and wicca represent significant efforts to revive, reinterpret, and adapt ancient Celtic and Irish spiritual practices for the contemporary world. Both traditions aim to honour Ireland's rich mythological heritage and often draw from ritualistic and cosmologic elements associated with pre-Christian societies. However, these connections between the modern movements and practices of ancient Ireland is complex and sometimes tenuous, as modern practitioners rely on a mixture of archaeological findings, folklore, historical context, and contemporary spiritual philosophies. Examining the available ancient evidence provides insights into similarities, divergences, and adaptations that characterise modern Irish druidry and wicca today. The religious practices of ancient Ireland, as suggested by archaeological evidence, point to a society deeply connected to nature, with strong focus on ancestor veneration, seasonal rituals, and cosmological alignment. Sites like Newgrange, Knout, and Carramore reveal sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and a deep reverence for the cyclical nature of life and death. Burial sites, megalithic tombs, and stone circles indicate that people of ancient Ireland held complex beliefs surrounding the afterlife, transitions, and the power of natural forces. The lack of written records from pre-Christian Ireland, however, means that our understanding is limited to material artefacts and later medieval manuscripts, which is often contained a blend of Christian and pagan elements. Evidence suggests that Druids, as a learned class amongst the Celts, likely held roles as spiritual guides, judges, healers, and advisors, performing a range of social and religious duties. Classical sources describe them as being involved in sacrificial rituals, legal matters, and education. However, these accounts were typically written by outsiders such as the Romans, who might have misconstrued or misrepresented these practices due to cultural biases and limited understanding. Therefore, while modern Irish Druidry seeks to honour the Druids' legacy, the exact nature of their practices and beliefs remains somewhat obscure. Modern Irish Druidry is an attempt to reconstruct and honour the spirit of ancient Druidic practices, often guided by values such as reverence for nature, community, and wisdom. Many Druidic groups, like the Order of Bards of Ancient Groups and the Irish Druid Network, focus on rituals that align with seasonal changes, honouring the four main Celtic festivals, Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain, as well as the solstices and equinoxes. These rituals are inspired by the idea that the ancient Irish were attuned to the rhythms of the land and the turning of the seasons, a concept grounded in evidence from Neolithic and Bronze Age sites with solar and lunar alignments. However, much of modern Druidry is speculative, based on educated guesses rather than definitive historical evidence. Since ancient Druids left no written records, today's Druids often look to Irish medieval texts such as the Táin Bó Cúailnge, Cathalred of Cooley, and other sagas for inspiration. These texts, while valuable for their mythological content, were written by Christian monks centuries after the pre-Christian era and often contain elements of moral and religious reinterpretation. Thus, modern Irish Druids face the challenge of navigating this blend of Christianized accounts and ancient folklore to craft rituals that feel authentic yet adaptable to contemporary needs. One key area of focus on modern Irish Druidry is the veneration of sacred landscapes and places of power such as mountains, rivers, wells, and stone circles. While ancient Irish people likely viewed these places as having spiritual significance, today's Druids interpret them through a lens of environmental stewardship and respect for interconnectedness of all life. Druidic practices often emphasize meditative and contemplative engagement with nature, viewing the natural world as a sacred text that can guide ethical living and personal growth. Wicca, particularly in its Celtic and Irish-inspired forms, draws on the broader traditions of European paganism, but incorporates specific elements of Irish myth and folklore. Founded in the mid-20th century by figures like George Gardner, Wicca combines ceremonial magic, nature worship, and dualistic deities, often represented as the god and goddess. Celtic Wicca, a branch within Wicca that emphasizes Irish myth and Celtic symbolism, integrates deities from the Irish pantheon, such as Bridget, the Dagda, and Morrigan, as well as Celtic symbols such as the Triskel and the spiral. One central feature of Wicca is the practice of the 8 Sabbats, or seasonal festivals, which include the 4 Celtic cross-quarter days such as Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain, along with the solstices and equinoxes. These festivals are celebrated with rituals that honour the cycle of life and death, the harvest and return of spring. They align closely with the ancient Celtic calendar. Although the specific rituals of ancient Irish society are largely unknown, Wiccan Sabbats evoke a similar focus on seasonal change, transformation, and fertility, capturing the essence of what many believe to be the core themes in ancient Celtic spirituality. However, Wiccan practices often incorporate ritual tools, magical spells, and deities from various pantheons beyond the Irish context, leading to a syncretic system that differs from single ancient belief system. For example, Wiccans may invoke Irish deities alongside deities from other traditions, a practice that reflects the eclectic nature of Wicca rather than a historically accurate revival. Wiccan rituals typically involve casting a circle, invoking elemental guardians, and calling upon the god and goddess, a structure inspired by ceremonial magic that would not have been part of ancient Irish ritual as far as historical evidence suggests. The use of offerings as sacrificial practices is one of the more complex aspects of modern Irish druidry and wicca, as evidence of ancient Irish sacrifice and offerings is limited but significant. Archaeological evidence from bog bodies, animal bones found at ritual sites, and references in myth suggest that sacrificial practices were likely part of ancient religious life. However, modern interpretations usually translate sacrifice into symbolic acts, such as offering food, flowers, or incense to nature spirits or ancestors. Similarly, divination, another practice associated with the ancient druids, according to classical sources, has been adapted in various forms by modern practitioners. Today's druids and Wiccans might use tools such as ohm sticks, tarot cards, or runes for guidance and insight. While these methods are not direct continuation of ancient practices, they reflect a desire to connect with the intuitive and mystical aspects of life the ancient Irish practitioners may have valued. One major aspect of both modern Irish druidry and Wicca is the veneration of deities and mythological figures from Irish lore. While the ancient Irish pantheon was likely complex and multifaceted, modern practitioners have often streamlined these deities into archetypal roles. For example, Bridget is revered in both traditions as a goddess of poetry, healing, and smithcraft, often seen as a nurturing mother figure. Cernus, a pan-Celtic deity associated with nature and animals, has also been adapted by modern Wicca and Druidry as a representation of the wild, untamed aspect of nature. These deities are often approached with a highly personal way, reflecting a modern emphasis on individual spirituality rather than the communal worship that might have been characterized ancient practices. Modern practitioners may view these deities as archetypes or energies rather than distinct personalities, a perspective influenced by Jungian psychology and the New Age movement. Folklore plays an essential role in bridging ancient beliefs with modern practice. Many aspects of Irish folk tradition, such as protective charms, healing rituals, and season customs, have been incorporated into contemporary Irish druidry and Wicca as echoes of pre-Christian beliefs. For example, the practice of leaving offerings at holy wells, tying cloths and trees for healing, or lighting candles on specific feast days are seen as ways of maintaining connection with Ireland's pagan past. Folk magic practices such as the involving of herbs, stones, or household charms have similarly been absorbed into modern Irish druidry and Wicca, where they serve as accessible, tangible ways to engage with ancient customs. Though the historical accuracy of these practices as Celtic is debated, they help practitioners feel connected to a lineage of spirituality that values direct interaction with nature and the unseen world. Modern Irish druidry and Wicca are characterised by a blend of historical interpretation and contemporary spirituality. While both traditions seek to honour Ireland's pre-Christian roots, they face challenges in reconciling historical authenticity with the needs and perspectives of modern practitioners. The eclectic, adaptive nature of these traditions allows for creativity and personal growth, but it also raises questions about the extent to which they can be considered true revivals of ancient Irish religion. Ultimately, modern Irish druidry and Wicca serve as evolving spiritual paths that resonate with the enduring themes of connection to nature, respect for cycles of life and death, and reverence for ancestral wisdom. These practices may not fully replicate ancient rituals, but they allow for a meaningful engagement with Ireland's mythological and spiritual heritage, adapting its essence to meet the spiritual needs of contemporary society. Evidence gathered through archaeology, astronomy, folk traditions, and classical sources gives us a framework for understanding ancient Irish spirituality, but significant gaps remain. While modern practices inspired by Druidry and Celtic tradition evoke the reverence for nature that's likely characterised ancient Irish beliefs, they cannot fully replicate the old religion due to our limited understanding of its nuances. In conclusion, although we may honour and revive certain themes, the true creation of Ireland's ancient religion remains a beautiful yet elusive aspiration. Sinean Scale is Misha Seán Ó Tuama Vor Leahor Gur Mahagwiv As Vor Tom Quitoma August Sloan Gofol.